Well, welcome to this evening's show. You've got the slightly Christmassy theme with my feeble little Christmas tree in the background there. Now, this evening was billed as a discussion about so-called conversion therapy with Phil Tanzer and Belinda Brown, but unfortunately, Belinda is not well tonight, so we're going to have to postpone that discussion, and that will take place maybe the 7th of January. We'll see, but we'll do that as soon as we're able, because that's a really important topic as we move towards this sort of counselling and support being criminalized. But Phil is here, so Phil's going to join us in a while. You remember a couple of weeks ago when we had a guest who didn't arrive on screen. Then we went through half of the political compass questions. It was quite interesting. We had a lot of interaction as well on the comments. So we're going to do that tonight. We're going to do the other half and see what issues come up with that. But before we do that, I just want to show you this book. Now, I've done a few videos. I've put a few things on social media over the last few weeks, over the last couple of years, actually, of really appalling children's books where they're just preaching the transgender ideology, all sorts of other, unhelpful messages. But someone sent me this, and it's a complete contrast. It's the complete complete opposite of those books. So it starts off, you think, it's about an elephant and mice. So you think it's going to end up that the elephant realizes they're actually a mouse or something, but it ends up they realize that they are actually an elephant, even though they're like some of the things that the mice like. So if you want an antidote to some of the other nonsense, well, it's worse than nonsense, some of the dangerous messages in children's books, I recommend Excellent Edward by Zoe Carter. Right, now let's bring on Phil from Durness. Welcome, Phil.
Hello again. Nice to be here. And such a shame that Belinda couldn't make it. I hope she is feeling well soon. I would have liked to talk about the topic.
Yes, this is a very important topic, and we'll cover it. I think maybe 7th of January, or sometime in January, in any case. We can start off with a Christmas tree competition, I think. I think you've won.
I'm pretty sure I won.
We've got a better one in the living room. I still think you might have won even on that one. So as it happened,
I have to say minus made out of plastic. So I feel sorry for the real trees to be cut down. So I decided to get myself a plastic one, and he's been like a faithful Christmas tree for over 6 years now.
Yeah, we're on artificial ones. Amazingly, the one behind me isn't real either, by the way. That's artificial. So very conveniently, we were halfway through the political compass last time. It was interesting, the topics it threw up. Some of the questions, I thought, they just seemed pretty ill thought out. But I thought, are they ill thought out, or are they actually really cleverly written? Because these are the questions that do actually give information about people's standpoints. I think I was tending towards the former. But anyway, so we'll carry on and have a chat about these. Now, just let me get the comments up. Right. So, we've got someone, I don't need conversion therapy, someone's commenting. Right, that's great. Then don't get any.
That's absolutely fine.
That's quite simple.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right, that's that one.
Yeah.
Solved.
I think nobody who doesn't want therapy should have therapy, because it wouldn't make any difference anyways. If you need help, and if most of all, if you want help, you should receive help. But if you don't want any help, then that's your choice.
Yeah. Right. The same person saying, what is transgender ideology? What would you say to that?
That's actually a good question. I would say I met people that see themselves as transgender, and to be honest, I never had a problem with them. They were not political. They just cared about their own self-perception, their own well-being. And some of them, I think, that made good choices. Some of them, I think, made bad choices. The difference to transgender ideology is I think it doesn't look at individuals. I think it looks as people as a group. But you can't look at people that struggle with certain mental issues, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but you can't deal with that as one group. Every person goes through a completely different experience, and transgender ideologists, I think they say, as soon as somebody says, I feel uncomfortable in my gender, they are in favor of affirmative discourse and telling, well, then just change your gender.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say, Richard?
Yeah, I would say it's the broader concept that changing gender is something that's, well, gender and sex are used interchangeably. So it's the idea that changing gender, changing sex is something that's an option for people, and it can be done, and it can be a positive way forward. And I tend to see things differently than that. So I think there's some people, for whatever reasons, and again, I do think it is some sort of mental health issue. That's something that they want to do, but I don't think ultimately it's something that's going to be helpful for people. So it's not something I would encourage, and I don't think it's something that schools or the medical profession or whatever should be encouraging. I think support to help people to accept and live within the actual sex gender is ultimately the best way forward. But what we were going to be talking about tonight is the fact that even that sort of support is heading towards being criminalized. But we've got another question. If people don't need help for being who they are, what would you say to that, Phil?
I think that I think that's that statement in itself is flawed, because it's not we are constantly changing, we are evolving. I mean, I'm not the same person that I was a week ago, because I experienced changes. And I think sometimes in our life, we need help from other people to learn more about themselves. We reevaluating our values and our path in life. And if there is a person who felt comfortable with being gay for a while and then says, I don't see a future on this path, I want to take a different path, they should have support, and maybe a different, maybe not. For me, it was, I think.
Yeah, could you just repeat the last sentence? It just distorted a bit.
Yeah, for me, it worked. I went through different phases in my life, and I was looking for the perfect, or for the right expression of my feelings, and I'm still not there yet. I'm still going through a process. So when somebody says people don't need help for being who they are, no, but maybe they need help to become who they want to be or who they are meant to be, and that choice should be open. I mean, if a trans person, for example, wants to change sex and wants to change their gender, they need help as well. They need to go to a practitioner to do the surgery. So if this person says people don't need help for being who they are, especially trans people do. And if you don't feel comfortable with being trans, then you need help as well to deal with these feelings, I think.
So, Beaky Buck, assuming you're still watching, an invitation. Would you like to come on screen and have a chat with us? If you would, put a comment, put your email address up, or just say that you would, and we'll see what we can do. You can be our impromptu guest. No. Okay. I mean, it's interesting. I spent half my life trying to invite people to come onto this to debate. We get people on to talk about various issues, but trying to get people from the other side of some of these arguments to come and debate, dear oh dear, it's an uphill struggle, to say the least. Almost impossible on a lot of them. So that's a shame. That's a shame. Anyway, there's
another interesting comment from Lucia Thomas.
Yeah, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so they could be suffering from body dysmorphia and therefore need support in accepting and loving themselves as they are. I completely agree. I think there are people that really do struggle with body dysmorphia, and I think that these people need help in some way. That might be trans affirming, or that might be trans challenging. I do know people that did have body dysmorphia but decided not to do the transition, and that said, no, I feel uncomfortable with this body, but that's my cross to bear, so to speak. Same when you have a face that you don't like, you can either get an operation or you can deal with not being super happy with your face. But yeah, people need help. I agree with that.
The thing with faces is you can adjust your face, but you're not trying to be something that you're not in having that done. You're just trying to change the way you appear. If someone tries to live as the opposite sex, I think there's an extra element to it, because you're expecting other people to treat you as, and you're identifying yourself as something that you actually aren't. So that's I would say that would be different. If we just chip into Beaky Buck, right? You said not
but even.
Sorry, could you just say, if you want to email us then, contact@scottishfamily.org, contact@scottishfamily.org, and we can see what we can do in the new year if you're interested in that. It would be great to have you on to hear what you've got to say. Okay, Phil, sorry.
I mean, I'm tattooed all over my body. My whole body is tattooed, and I actually had designs to get my face tattooed as well, more than it already is. And I don't regret getting my tattoos, but I do know that my tattoos affected my life, both positively and negatively. And if I had tattooed my face, I think it would have really destroyed options in my life. And at the time when I was thinking about that, I mean, I was 20 something, and I thought, oh, that would look really great, and I don't really want to be part of society. Well, now I want to be part of society. And if I had the tattoos in my face, it's very difficult to reverse that. And that would also be a decision that I would have to deal with, to live with. And I know of quite a few transgender people that had to reverse their operation. And I was talking to one not too long ago. She was a woman, then she transitioned to a man and retransitioned to a woman, but her voice will always stay deep. So she sounds like a woman with a man's voice. And she can never reverse that. It's a very difficult situation, very difficult.
Yeah. Well, you're conflating gender identity with biological gender. Now, I find once we get into trying to define these terms, it's like wading through quicksand. The terms get so confused and contradictory. I mean, gender is usually defined as the subjective sense of maleness or femaleness, something like that. So to talk of biological gender on current use of the term, I would say that doesn't make sense. Gender identity makes sense, but biologically, that should be what's called sex. I mean, in the olden days, sex and gender were synonymous, and that was quite clear. We had other words for maleness and femaleness, words like masculinity and femininity, which did the job perfectly well. But now those words have gone, and we end up with the gender ones that are very confused. So I don't think we're conflating those two terms at all, because I don't think there is such a thing as biological gender on the current understanding of what gender is. So I don't think that actually makes sense. But if you want to clarify, then that's fine. Yeah. So I would agree with Butter there. That's the way the terms have been redefined currently. I don't think it's helpful, but that is the way they've been redefined.
I think that I'm okay with the term gender expression. And I have no problem with people expressing themselves any way they want to. I mean, I was wearing dresses when I was in my teens because I was a Marilyn Manson fan. So I was wearing dresses and I was wearing makeup. That was just my self-expression. But didn't want to force society to call me with different pronouns. I think that it's very demanding. What you want to do, that's your choice, but don't force the rest of society to go along with that.
Yeah, yeah. There's two separate issues. I think there's the freedom of people to obviously dress and sort of act as they please.
Yeah,
I mean, that's pretty straightforward. But on the other hand, there's the question of whether or not that's a good thing for people, whether or not they think that's going to be a positive road to go down. I would say if someone was beginning to do that, that's something that's, I would say, not to be encouraged. You're not necessarily going to like come down like a ton of bricks, but that's not a road to encourage people down. And maybe with younger people, there's a place for, you know, a nudge in the other direction and saying, is that really what you want to do? You know, maybe people are going to get confused. You're going to get confused. Where's this going to head to? Taking that sort of line, I think, can be appropriate. Right, Beaky Buck, what do we got now? It's pretty simple. Gender identity is how you present yourself. Well, I would disagree with that. I think that's not the usual definition of gender identity. Gender identity would be the way a person describes themselves. How you present yourselves would be gender expression. I would have thought, but I quite understand why there's confusion, because I think these terms are poorly defined and they're used very loosely and often in contradictory ways. But on the current usual understanding, I would have to disagree with you on that. Using desired pronouns is not hard. Well, it's not hard. I don't think anyone's claiming that it's hard to form those words in your mouth and to, you know, speak them out. That's not the hard thing. The challenge people find is that it's a conscience issue, and that you're effectively, in a sense, it's a form of lying, because you're endorsing something, you're communicating as though something's true that you actually think is false. So I think that's why there's a conscience issue within that.
Also, I do think it is hard. 2 years ago, we had a transgender identifying person at a festival that I organized, and this person was biologically male. There was no operation, as far as I know, no hormone. This person was almost 2 meters tall and was built like a brick and had huge hands and a very deep voice. And she dressed like Robert Palmer from Led Zeppelin, so in a feminine way, but she still looked very much like a man. Now, I didn't have a problem using the she pronouns for her, but a friend of mine was there, and she is super liberal and she has no problem, and it just slipped, and she kept calling her he because she looked like a he and she sounded like a he, and it caused big problems. And during the event, we actually filmed her because she was a poet, and she talked, and later on she watched herself on the footage, and then she apologized and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry that I was cross with you for calling me he. I didn't realize how deep my voice is and how much I still look like a man." And it was hard. It was real cognitive dissonance. And you just use the pronouns he, him, and she, her. That's fine. But what about the 75,000 other pronouns? Zim, zer. I think that is absolutely unfair. You can't force people to use certain words. You can't.
I've sometimes thought, if I was in that situation, let's say in a professional context, where someone said, "These are my pronouns," and I thought, well, I don't really want to use those words because I don't think they're reflecting truth. You know, I don't want to be forced to endorse a view that I think is incorrect. An option, of course, is to not use pronouns. Pronouns are used in place of, in this case, proper nouns, people's names. So you can just use the person's name. I mean, it might sound a bit odd sometimes, but I suppose that's a way around it. Anyway, we've got a Beaky Buck. Who are you to say what makes me happy? No, I don't want to say what makes you happy. Phil, are you?
No. To be honest, I think your happiness is your own thing. You can decide what makes you happy, and you can live your life accordingly. if you don't like what we say, you don't have to listen to us. And we would ask you not to force us to say something we don't want to say. Everybody happy.
Yeah. I suppose I could answer that slightly different. Let's imagine a parallel situation. Let's imagine you've got someone who's, say, taking an addictive drug. They've just started taking it, and they say, "This makes me happy." And I would say to them, well, it's maybe making you happy in the very short term. Ultimately, this is not going to be a positive thing for you. Now, if they were to say, what right have you got to tell me what makes me happy? I would say, I'm just saying this is what I foresee in the future, and I think the good advice would be this. If you're saying, who are you to say what makes me happy? That could be taken as excluding, in a preemptory manner, every piece of advice you might receive. So every person who says, I don't think that's a good path that you're on, maybe you'd be better thinking about that, you'd say, no, you shouldn't say that. You can't say what makes me happy. But I think we should welcome advice from people. We don't have to accept it all, but maybe welcoming advice is a more open and a constructive mindset.
I mean, that's one of the main pillars of parenting, is telling children what your experience is to prevent your children to make the same mistakes. They're still free to make the mistakes, but it's your job to warn them. Yeah. To the best of your knowledge.
Right. Message from Poland. We've got some Polish members of the Scottish Family Party in Scotland, which is great. So thanks for your greeting. I'll just let Phil pronounce your name.
Just because I'm German doesn't mean I can pronounce Scottish names.
It's closer than here.
Arkadiusz Milnak? Oh, it's really hard.
Yeah, that was quite good. Anyway, thanks for the message. Right. Be great. It's not default to they, them for everyone until you find out. Right. Okay. So you're asking me to change. Well, you're basically saying to English language speakers that they've got to change the traditional way of referring to people, and they've got to take away sex-based pronouns on the basis of this in order to avoid upsetting transgender people. The whole language has got to be turned on its head. Well, that's completely unnecessary. The other thing that communicates to people, if you do away with he and she, that communicates that the ideas of male and female are somehow defunct, that these can't be assumed anymore. You've got to start with an open mind with everyone you meet. And I think that's a very unhelpful ethos in a society, because it's constantly putting before people, putting at the forefront of people's minds that gender is not obvious. You can change gender. There's transgender people. It's all fluid. And I don't think that's a helpful thing for society. Whereas if people are used to saying he, she, I think that construction of gender identity as an assumption in society is a helpful thing, and it protects people from harm. What do you think, Phil?
I agree with you. And a bit further down, Beakybug wrote, I am a gender abolitionist. Okay. Now, the thing is, Beaky, I have a gender, and I'm pretty sure that Richard has a gender, and we want to keep our genders. And there are 99.99 something % of the population that I'm sure want to keep their gender. So you are attacking our reality, which I think you are allowed to, because I advocate for free speech, but you are attacking my sensitivities. And how dare you attacking me and my perception of reality.
Yeah.
If you want us to accept trans sensitivities, how dare you not accepting cis, and I don't like that word, but cis sensitivities. We have our gender, and we would like to keep it. Thank you.
Yeah. The definition of gender is social and behavioral acts associated with one's biological sex, yes, but not intrinsic to sex. So expression is a huge part of that as well. Yeah, but by the current definition of gender, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
That's fine. Who I am is no more of a choice than the color of my skin. It's not a choice. Now, that depends what you mean by who I am. Phil, I'll let you go first with this one. Then.
Okay, first of all, you can change the color of your skin. That's what tanning studios are for. And I would use the exact same example for the choice of who you are. You can't completely change who you are, but you can slightly change who you are. When you go on holiday, the color of your skin slightly changes. And when you choose certain paths in your life, you change who you are. I can decide if I want to be a criminal or if I want to be a law-abiding citizen. And if I start becoming an alcoholic, I will become a different person. So we can change who we are.
Yeah.
For better or worse.
Yeah. I think Beaky Buck, I think your idea is that your subjective sense of identity. So, for example, a man's feeling that he's actually a woman, that's the actually objective thing. That's the fact. And that's the thing that can't be changed. Whereas a person's body, well, that can be, that's malleable, which I think, to me, it's quite apparent and obvious that that's a reversal of the truth. Yep. It's the physical sex that is actually immutable and objective. And it's the subjective sense of gender identity that is the subjective thing. Whereas you're reversing it with very confident language. It's who I am. But I would just disagree with that. If I'm assuming what you're meaning. So when a man says, I am a woman, I would just say, well, you're wrong. Okay, you're mistaken in that view. So
yeah, I would say, if somebody says, I am a woman, I would say you have the right to believe that, but that doesn't make it true for my reality and for legal reality and biological reality. I would say, well, enjoy your delusion.
A gender abolitionist.
Yeah.
Now, I've come across this point of view before. I mean, the gender abolitionist, this is, now I'll try and word this in quite a sensitive way. I mean, this is on the fringe. It's quite an extreme view. Now, if that's extreme, doesn't mean I don't mean like you're going to plant bombs under people, but it's quite an extreme view. It really is off at the far extreme of gender ideology. This idea that the society would progress best if we completely did away with the idea of male and female. So when it came to having a family, for example, well, you get what's taught in Scottish schools right from nursery. All you need is a uterus, sperm, and someone to be and an egg. Sorry, you just need those three ingredients. How many males and females are involved in this process? That's entirely irrelevant. We'll need to leave that behind. So this really extreme gender abolition ideology, it's what schools and nurseries, is what they're moving towards. They see this as their ideal. And I think it's a very dangerous ideology. And it's one of the many things where you can listen to MSPs in the Scottish Parliament for a month of Sundays, but none of them get it. None of them can see that this really extreme ideology is being progressed through the education system because it hasn't got numbers in it. They can only understand things with numbers in. So they just can't see it. Have you come across the idea of gender abolition, Phil, before?
Well, the thing is, if he's a gender abolitionist, then he is also against trans issues, because trans is short for transitioning, and for transitioning you actually need gender. You need two gender roles to actually transition from one to the other. So he also wants to abolish transgenderism, I assume.
I would imagine, Beaky Buck can come on in a minute, but I would imagine Beaky Buck might say, yes, that's absolutely right. In their utopia, there would be no need to be transgender because there were no gender identities. So everyone just makes it up.
But people like what is traditionally seen as transgender people, they don't want to be in a gray spectrum. They actually want to transition from one side to the other. So we would disagree with Beaky Buck.
Yeah. Right. Body dysmorphia is a psychiatric disorder and needs psychiatric support. It does not need to force everyone else into accepting the delusions of the sufferer. Right.
I agree.
Spot on, Patrick. Like the icon too. It's not called an icon. What do you call the avatar?
Yeah.
Anyway, quite agree, Patrick. Spot on. Right, what have we got here? Being a woman is a gender, not sex, however. You're conflating biologically. Right, don't quite follow that one. Maybe we could have another try with that one. I think maybe you've made a slip.
Well, to me personally, being a woman is both sex and gender, and they are connected. And I think that a man who behaves like a woman and who presents as a woman is still a man who presents as a woman but is not a woman. So I think that gender and sex are connected. What do you think, Richard?
I think they're connected biologically. I think the behaviors and character traits associated, for example, with femaleness are in very large part biologically based. I think that's what leads to them. Whereas the feminist theorists say that not at all. That if people were brought up in the sort of gender neutral environment, then boys and girls would grow up to have the same personality traits, the same interests, even though the mountain of evidence shows that absolutely conclusively that is not true. It's what they believe. I always go back to the experiments by, now let me get his name right, Simon Baron Cohen.
Oh, yeah.
Cambridge psychologist. I mean, he was involved in some research on one-day-old babies. And at 1 day old, male babies are more likely to look at some sort of mechanical device. Female babies are more likely to look at faces. So these things can be measured from the very beginning. They're common across all cultures throughout all of history and however you measure them. And so denying them is just totally incredible. And yet that's the view that holds sway, certainly in the Scottish education and the Scottish government and the media, and very widely.
Yeah.
Not just male and female. Right. So meaning you want to abolish them all?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we got the drift of what you were saying there. Body dysmorphia is not gender dysphoria. Right. Body dysmorphia, is that when people, for example, don't like their left leg?
Body dysmorphia is, for example, bodybuilders can suffer from body dysmorphia. They still think that they are too small, even though they're already humongous. And anorexia, as far as I know, is body dysmorphia. So if you don't, if what you see or what you feel is different from what other people see regarding your body.
Okay. But there's also the interesting phenomenon of people who believe that a part of their body doesn't actually belong to their body. Are you familiar with that? So you get people who might say, their left leg doesn't feel like it's theirs, and they hate it and want to get rid of it. Yeah. So they go to the medical profession and they say, please cut my leg off, even though it's perfectly healthy. Yeah. Now, I might be a bit out of date here, but not too long ago, there was a surgeon in Scotland who would do that, who would cut off perfectly healthy limbs from people in order to help with these conditions. Apparently, it's caused by the fact that within your mind, within your brain, there's like a map of your body. Okay. And if something goes wrong with that map, you feel like a part of your body isn't actually under your control, isn't actually yours. I mean, it's quite controversial what he did. But I'd say in doing that, though, if you cut someone's leg off for psychological reasons, I mean, I'm not sure that's really the way to go. But even if it is, it doesn't involve trying to, if you like, live a lie from that point onwards. So I think that's what distinguishes that from sex change surgery. Sorry, Phil.
There are gray areas. I think when some people really suffer under certain, for example, disfigurements, or if they're born with huge ears, and it would be a very easy operation to just put them on their body. It's a slippery slope. On the one hand, if I had children and my children were in that situation, I think I would say you can change it, but don't think that you're gonna love everything about you. I think the most important thing is that you accept yourself for who you are. And I think people with body dysmorphia, they just have that to an extreme like in an extreme way. And I would say you have to change what's in your mind. You have to start to accepting yourself.
Yeah. That's interesting, I think, with something I've been aware of is with teeth. Because the trend now is when kids' teeth are not quite perfect, they go to the orthodontist and have, and goodness knows how much it costs, go through this process and get them absolutely perfect. But surely the more perfect you make everyone, the more the person whose teeth are not quite perfect stands out. So the worse it is for them. So ultimately, is it a zero-sum game? That if you try to, the more procedures you do to make everyone perfect, there's always going to be the 5% or the 1% or whatever that people are going to notice, and you're just changing who it is. So I'm not sure, maybe it is a zero-sum game. I mean, it's just out of interest. I mean, my jaw could have been fixed when I was I can't remember how old it is. I was given the option of having it done, and I said no, partly because I was scared of an operation, and partly because I was quite young, but I did think through what I just said. I thought, what happens if just more and more people do this? But the interesting thing is, I heard someone on the radio the other day, and people with a so-called undershot jaw, like mine, they've done research in it to justify surgery to put it right. And the research findings are people who have it are generally perceived to be unfriendly, aggressive, violent, and unintelligent. So I'd just like to say to everyone, however smart and nice you think I am, I'm probably actually a bit smarter and a bit nicer. Anyway, right, what have we got next? Oh, we've had that one. Have we had that one? I want people not to be defined by labels, be free to be to the person they want to be. I would say that's not reality, though. People are not free to be whatever they want to be. People are born, male or female, and basically there are two types of people, and living within that identity is the way to a fulfilling and satisfied life. Trying to live outside those identities, I would say, is not the way to that. It's creating tensions that are difficult to resolve. I would say all the evidence is on my side of the argument for that. If you look where people do decide to deviate from the sort of binary sex identities, then that's accompanied with by a lot of other problems. So I think encouraging people into those two lanes, if you like, is actually what's best for people.
I think labels, every word is a label. We label a chair as something, we label a table something, and you in the question he used the word person. Well, what if the person doesn't want to identify as a person and wants to identify as a dog or as a bird? And if we get rid of all labels, there would be absolute chaos. And you can't, for example, when you go on a how do you call it, like a roller coaster, there are restrictions, age restrictions and height restrictions. What if you say, sorry, but I identify at a different height, and then you are being decapitated because you didn't like the label of your height? We need certain labels and we need certain norms to function as a society. I think it's absolutely fine that you don't like that. I think if you don't want to use any labels for yourself, then don't, but just don't force other people into your lifestyle choices. I think that's very arrogant from you.
If someone identifies as a woman, that is gender. Yes, I agree. That's the current definition. It's not sex. Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, I think we're agreed there. Yeah, I think we're fine.
Okay.
Regardless, I think
I do appreciate. Thank you so much for all the questions. I appreciate that. That's interesting.
Yeah, you're keeping us going here.
Yeah,
that's great. Keep them going. Keep them coming. Right, I think it's wrong to indoctrinate gender roles. What do you think of that, Phil?
What I would question what is the definition of gender roles, because I think what we're experiencing now is the indoctrination of destroying gender roles. At the moment, boys are encouraged to act like girls and girls are encouraged to act like boys, but that's not the destruction of gender roles. That's just a reversal of gender roles. I would say just let kids be, and they will get their inspiration from whoever they see fit. If they want to get their inspiration from their dad, they get it from the dad. If they want it from the mom, they get it from the mom. What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there is a role for presenting opportunities to boys to take an interest in things that boys and men are typically interested in, or character qualities. So there is a place for bringing up boys and girls in different ways, not trying to force them into anything, but just presenting the options and giving a bit of a nudge here and there. I think that's helpful, because in the longer term, that's an easier road, that's an easier path through life for them, I feel.
But if a kid feels very uncomfortable doing something, then don't do it. Can say, try it out. If you don't like it, you don't have to do it.
Yeah, if they like something different, then absolutely fine. Right, what we've got here. I want total freedom of expression, socially and politically, basically.
Well, okay. He says he wants total freedom of expression. That would include calling for violence and calling for murder and threats of violence and murder. And I would oppose that. I think in society we need certain rules. Even though I am for freedom of expression, there need to be minimal rules to actually protect peace in society.
Yeah, I would imagine what's in mind here in terms of freedom of expression. It might mean, for example, in terms of wearing clothes of associated with the opposite sex, for example. If it's
but he said politically as well. And if you have like total political freedom, that would also say that you can call for the extermination of parts of society. From a freedom of speech point of view, I would actually agree with him. I think that bad ideas are usually best managed by society itself, but there's a real danger of people calling for extreme violence, and we don't want to see that.
Yeah. So I think basically we say we're not quite sure what you've got in mind there. Right, I'm just having a look at the comments. Where have we got? Who determines happiness? That's a largely subjective thing.
Yes.
Well, happiness is entirely subjective. I mean, that's part of the definition of subjective. So, yes, but I'm not sure what we're supposed to imply from that. I think you think that's a point on your side of the argument, but I don't really get the impact of it. Shall we say, Phil, that you
I agree with him. It's a subjective thing, and I don't think that we want to infringe people's happiness, but we don't want to be forced by other people. We don't want our happiness to be mandated by other people.
Okay, Stone 1690. No liberal, that's a fairly unreasonable comparison. Right, when the comment came up, I'm not exactly sure what it was you were referring to. So if you want to put that in again, explain what it was, we can maybe talk about that.
Tunox says, the only people that see others as being defined by labels are the folks that are obsessed by them. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I think the idea that your identity is formed by some peripheral aspects of your personhood is a very dangerous one, and that's the direction we're heading, isn't it? It's not that you you have a certain race or sexuality or whatever, but that is the primary factor in who you are. So people would say, a man or a woman, that doesn't matter. That's not really part of who you are. But your race or sexual preference, whatever, that really has got to be top billing. That's who you really are. And I think that's a distorted view of humanity.
By the way, Beaky Buck, just to let you know, all over my body I have a symbol tattooed, and it's a combination of the male and the female astrological symbol. And because when I was younger, I did think that there should be more gender neutrality, and it was very important for me that my male side and my female side were balanced, and that I looked at both of them. And as I grew older, I just naturally moved more and more into masculinity, and now I really love my masculinity. That doesn't mean that I dislike my feminine traits, because we are all a mix of both of them. But my opinion has changed very, very much over the years. It has just naturally evolved. That doesn't mean that I disagree with who I was, but I evolved. I evolved into more manliness and more masculinity, and I think that path should be open for everybody. And we wanted to talk about conversion therapy today. And I think if you feel comfortable with something for a while, but then you're like, I don't think that's my path anymore, I think then you should receive the help that you want. Not forced upon you, but on your own terms, your own choice.
Yeah. How do you measure happiness? I wouldn't claim to have a means of measuring happiness, but I think it's a commonly understood term. Would you want to add anything to that, Phil?
I don't even like the word happiness a lot. To me, happiness is something very fleeting, something that you have for a moment. I prefer feeling content or feeling fulfilled. These are terms that work better for me.
But there's a concept that's very helpful, is the idea that some things you can only hit by aiming at something different. So if your life's mission is to be happy, so you're thinking, right, I've got an hour, how am I going to be happy within this hour? Well, that doesn't really work. But if you aim at other things more substantial and meaningful, then you get happiness thrown in for nothing along with
That's a good point.
That's I think that's quite an important one.
I had this conversation earlier on when I had a customer. I was cutting his hair. He's a young lad, just 20 years old, and we were talking about Tinder and dating. And I told him that I just don't see the value in dates and one-night stands anymore. And he said, well, I'm 18. No, he's 18. He said, I'm 18 years old and I just want to make my experiences. And I said, I get that. But if I could turn back time, I would tell myself there is not much value in that. It's fleeting moments, and a lot of them will leave you empty, where when you focus on something substantial, something where you can build if you wake up next to the same person again and again and again, you can actually build true happiness and meaningful happiness, and not just a moment of it.
Yeah. It's the point that our life's too short to live it by trial and error.
Yeah.
When there's a lot of good wisdom and guidance there that can avoid a lot of the pitfalls. But if people insist on living it by trial and error, often there's a price to pay in the longer term.
But even in the Bible, I mean, a lot of people that ended up following Jesus were people that made huge mistakes in their lives. And but the message is they turned their lives around. They didn't continue with their mistakes.
Yeah.
Just a second.
Okay.
Hello, Philip Tanzer.
Now, this is Stone 1690. Now, he said he wasn't much for Phil's parallel between roller coasters and identity. So Phil will return in a minute. We can admire his Christmas tree.
I'm back.
No, so someone's saying they weren't too keen on your parallel or illustration between roller coasters and identity. Analogy, that's the word I want. Your analogy between roller coasters and identity.
Oh, well, I think if labels don't have a meaning anymore, then nothing, or if we don't use words anymore to describe certain things, specific things, then that's the complete destruction of civilization. Our words need meaning. Otherwise, we're gonna live in Babylon, and we know how that ended. Even for those people who are not Christians, they know the story. If there is complete chaos in society, you can't. You have no foundation. It will crumble and fall apart. I'm sorry if the analogy of the roller coaster was just a specific example, saying that certain security things don't work anymore if you can't use labels.
Yeah. Right. How about this?
There are labels on skin protection products so that you don't get skin cancer. If these labels don't mean anything anymore, then you're gonna get skin cancer.
Right. By the way, we only started using gender pronouns at the tail end of the 1700s. Right. I am 99.99% certain that that is not true. So did Shakespeare never use the word he or she in all of his writings? In the King James Bible, did we never have he or she? We did. So Beakybuck, I'm sorry to say that is just absolutely demonstrably untrue. And I would suggest you think to yourself, wherever you heard that from, that is, to say the least, an unreliable source. And I would suggest you might like to reappraise who you've been believing on this topic. And what other so-called facts have you accepted from these same sources? I'd have a serious think about that.
It's possible that he refers to the use of the term they and them in regards to noble people and like the pluralis majestatis. Maybe that's what he's referring to, but that was not a common thing. That was only for certain people.
This idea gender is intrinsic to the English language is nonsense. I think that question, to me, that's not a coherent question. Language communicates concepts. The concept of gender, however understood, is a human universal. So every human language will have a means of communicating concepts related to gender. So I don't see any content in that point at all. Phil, do you see anything?
No.
No. Okay, right. Next one. Life's too short to live it the same way. That sounds depressing. But no one's suggesting you live life the same way in general. But on the other hand, there are some well-trodden paths that tend to lead to good destinations. For example, heterosexual marriage, child rearing. I mean, that's a path that tends on average to be fruitful and fulfilling and effective for society. There are other paths, for example, experimentation with illegal drugs, for example, that tend not to have those positive effects in the longer term. Now, if someone says, I'm definitely determined to do it my own way, I don't believe anything anyone says, I'm going to find out for myself. Well, good luck in a sense, but the odds are not great.
I would say because I was working in the porn industry and because I was at a lot of sex parties and stuff like that, luckily I had I would say a guardian angel. I never took drugs. I always protected myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here anymore. I'm pretty sure I would already be dead, or I would be sick or somewhere else. I would say that I am happy and content and healthy despite the path that I chose back then, not because of the path that I chose back then.
Yeah.
And so I would say in that dangerous jungle, I managed to survive and to thrive and to grow. But I know so many people that died, that are drug addicts, that are HIV positive, and suffer under massive depression. So I think there are better paths, and there are paths that are far more likely to lead you to depression and suicide and death.
Yeah. Right, so this is someone referring to the study I referred to about one-day-old babies.
Yeah.
Saying it's been debunked. Now, what tends to happen in the academic world is studies that come to conclusions that people don't like get criticized on various methodological grounds. And any study can be criticized one way or another. Now, it may be, I mean, I haven't looked into the academic discussion about that study. It may be that it's been criticized to the point where its credibility has been seriously undermined. I would imagine it might well not have been, but let's say it has. But you're still left with the mountain of every culture throughout human history. I mean, at the moment, wherever you go around the world, wherever you measure it, you find these similar clusters of traits around males and a different cluster of traits around females. It's just the fact, it's hardwired in. And the more egalitarian cultures become, the more pronounced these differences emerge. I mean, it's just total denial of reality. It's a triumph of ideology over reality to claim that these traits are actually the product of social conditioning. It's not a credible view at all. What's your take on that, Phil?
I agree with it. I know the same studies, but I have to say I didn't look into the studies. But I heard from several sources from different people. They agreed with your statement, but since I didn't look into the research myself, I can't say much about it.
Yeah. Someone just saying that, yeah, on the screen here, we get comments from everywhere, from Twitter, from YouTube, and from Facebook. So you might not be seeing all the comments coming up. Right, this one. Should a college or university insist or enforce that a straight man or woman only refers to themselves as cisgender?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They're men and women.
Yeah. Yeah. Then using that term, again, you're sort of endorsing the ideology of it. It's like asking people to describe themselves as, you know, pagans or whatever, if they're not Christians or whatever. You're using a term that is from someone else's worldview. Right, and this should be, I know many families ended in disaster and been torn apart. Right, okay. That's my Uncle Ted smoked 50 a day and got run over by a bus when he was 95. Therefore, what's your problem with smoking? Is that odd? It's just about it.
Yeah, Beaky, we're talking about statistics. We're talking about statistics, and there are very clear statistics that indicate that the best path to happiness is a stable family where people stay together, where they raise their children. It's the best for the children. There are always exceptions. We are well aware of that, but that's the statistic.
Right, we've got 1 minute to go. We've got a biggie there. I won't say anything about this one. I'll leave this. But Phil, do you want to have a last word just for a few seconds on that?
What would be your advice to homosexuals? I would say I don't have advice to homosexuals. I have advice to people. Be careful with what you do. Don't experiment with your sexuality. Assess your heart and be very careful, and don't let your genitals control your thoughts. Let your thoughts control your genitals. If I could go back in time, I would tell myself to open myself more towards women and listen to my feeling, because I did have a feeling back then that sexuality wasn't the best way for me, and I ignored that after a while, and it wasn't good. So my advice to everybody is to find a committed relationship with a person that you love and a person that loves you, whom you can trust and who trusts you, and planning something very stable. If you are gay and you have no attraction towards the opposite gender, I would say find a partner who has the same values as you and try to live a committed gay relationship. If you're unsure, then try women. But again, in a committed relationship, if you're straight, find a partner that you want to have a family with.
Okay, right, thank you. I would I'm reluctant to answer that question in the dying seconds of this live stream. I'd have quite a lot to say, and it's a bit of a minefield. So I will leave my comments for another day. But thanks very much to Phil. So that's 9 o'clock. All that remains is for us to wish you a very happy Christmas. This is the last live stream of 2020, and we'll be back, I think, on the 7th of January. So thanks for watching. Thank you very much. Watch later as well. Thanks again for Phil. Ever entertaining and interesting.
And I wish a Merry Christmas to all of you out there, and no matter how you identify.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for your questions, for the challenging questions. It's always good to have people on here that disagree. That keeps the discourse alive.
Yeah. And if anyone would like to come on, drop an email to contact@scottishfamily.org and we'll see what we can do. Right, farewell, happy Christmas, and see you in January. Good night.
Cheers, bye.